Okay, well, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. I'm going to talk about DNA, which is something that Family Search doesn't participate in directly. But I really feel like we're missing a boat that really is wonderful if we can learn how to take advantage of our DNA. And a lot of us, we take the tests and we sit back and say, okay, now what do I do? And we really don't know what to do with the DNA. What I've tried to do is prepare, this is part of a series that I give to genealogy societies, but this one specifically to Ancestry. And I try to do is to show you how a layman, somebody who doesn't want to get involved in the technology part of this and all the scientific stuff, how you can use your DNA to really make some progress with your family history. Now, this is really geared more towards you folks and trying to help you to do your own DNA and benefit from it. But also knowing this, then when somebody says, well, should I take a DNA test or not, you can be able to give them answers of ways that it can benefit them. And I think you'll be amazed at what you'll be able to do if you do your DNA test at Ancestry, so that you can take part and use their tools that they have. And so that's what we're going to do today. Reason I picked this particular slide for the startup, if you ever go to Utah and you see the Ancestry home campus, they have two big glass buildings that are right next to each other. This doesn't look anything like their buildings because theirs are kind of greenish in color, but it's the same basic idea, these big glass buildings. So anyway, let's explore DNA and how you can use it to really to your advantage, and you can find out how easy it is to organize your DNA at Ancestry thanks to their tools. So we're going to talk about two main things today. We're going to talk about their matches and the way they organize the matches to make them able to be organized in a way that will be useful to you, and then use their tool called ThruLines, which is an absolutely phenomenal tool. And I think you'll see why when we get through talking about it. Now, why would you want to do your Ancestry at Ancestry? The biggest reason is do your DNA at Ancestry. The biggest reason is because this is the biggest holder of DNA test results in the world. Over 20 million people have tested there. And so when you do your test, you're being able to be compared with the largest group of DNA test takers that there is on Earth. And so it's the best single place to go. When somebody says, well, where should I test? This is the place I suggest you start at. And it's also very convenient because as LDS members, we're able to have a free Ancestry account. And a lot of people that aren't LDS, the general public, have their own Ancestry accounts anyway. So if you have an account at Ancestry, it just makes sense to do this. Their tools are wonderful. And you actually, if you learn how to use their tools, you can go to many other sites and be able to do the same basic things, most of the same basic things at other sites. They'll have slightly different tools, but the basic ideas that we're going to show you today are found at most of the other main sites. By the way, I noticed today that there is it's not really a sale, but it is, I guess. MyHeritage is allowing free uploads of DNA from other companies. Like they'll accept your Ancestry results. You can download the results in a file and then upload those results to MyHeritage. The catch is that unless you have a free account like we have, at MyHeritage, you have to pay like $90 or $119, I can't remember which, to have access to all their DNA tools if you're not a regular subscriber to MyHeritage. But with the special that's going with RootsTech, you can upload your DNA there, and for no charge, they will allow the people that upload during this week to have free access to all their DNA tools permanently. So that's a nice deal. There's always deals with RootsTech. The sale for Ancestry DNA kits, I'm sure, will be a very low price this week. So check it out if you haven't already had your test. Okay, are there drawbacks? Well, the funny drawback is they do not do the deep stuff that's real scientific, and that's not what we want to do anyway, so that's fine. And the other funny drawback is the fact that they have too much data. I mean, they can bring you back too many matches when they have 20 million people to match you up to. And so they actually limit the amount of matches that you're able to see, because it would just be too cumbersome and use up too much of their bandwidth to supply us with thousands and thousands of matches. So they do kind of limit it to the more serious matches that you have. And then there's a lot of use of trees with their DNA. And of course, the trees that are at Ancestry are always kind of questionable. So, you know, good data gives you good results, bad data gives you bad results. So you have to be a little bit careful. But otherwise, it's really a neat place to put your DNA. Okay, let's talk about matches. This is the first screen you see when you go to matches. It shows that I have over 1,000 fourth cousins or closer. And over time, they've added a lot of features. When they first came out, it was just kind of so-so, like, it's going to take a lot of work to figure out how these matches are related to me. But as time's gone on, they've developed really good tools. And I've seen that they're using their tools. As a genealogist, I can see some great uses for these matches. They'll help me find cousins that I didn't know otherwise. And these cousins can help me break through brick walls. And I can also use the DNA to verify my tree, the paper tree that I've developed, to find out if it's a real tree or not, because the paper trail and the true bloodlines are not always the same. And that's one thing that DNA can do, is it can help you to verify that what you're following is truly your ancestry. And it will therefore uncover sometimes hidden situations where there's these non-paternal events in your tree. So sometimes we don't want to know these things, and it makes a real mess, but better to know the truth than not. Now, the big thing here is, if you're going to do this, you really need to have a public tree at Ancestry, a tree that you can link your DNA to. Because once you do that, then you unleash the multitude of things that they can do for you to assist you in matching up your matches with where they match you and things like that. So it's really, really important that you have a tree. If you don't have a tree, the things we're going to talk about tonight are going to be much harder to do. And we need to start looking then at those matches. And I see we have a note, and that one's not for me, so that's okay. I can keep going. So this is what the basic match screen looks like. We have to learn one scientific thing. Your DNA is measured in a thing called centimorgans. And the centimorgans are abbreviated CM. And so basically what the scientists did is they took our DNA, and as talked about in the past, your DNA inside one cell has about 3 meters of DNA. That one cell has 3 meters of DNA in it. And they've been able to map this DNA And the scientists have divided it up in units of measurement in length, and it's called centimorgans. And they've divided this 3 meters of DNA into 7,400 centimorgans, so that we can use, like inches and feet, we can use a distance measurement to help us understand what we have. You have 7,400 centimorgans of DNA. Now, you get half of that from your father, and you get half of that from your mother. And your siblings don't actually share 7,400 centimorgans, because this is autosomal DNA and it comes to you randomly from your parents. So they've discovered that full siblings usually share about 3,500 centimorgans, which is a big number. And the bigger the number, the closer people are related to you. Your siblings have about 3,500 centimorgans. Your children also have about 3,500 centimorgans of your DNA, because the other half comes from your spouse. Your grandchildren will have, or your half siblings like I have, will have half of that, and they'll have about 1,750 centimorgans. And so we can use these numbers to approximate relationships. The catch is, like that 1,750 centimorgans, that could be my grandchild, that could be my half sister, or it could be my grandparent. And so there's a bunch of different people that would share with you about the same amount. So the way they list your matches is they start with your closest matches. And so red is stuff I've added to the screen. But the first match is my daughter Heidi, and she shares with me almost 3,500 centimorgans, just like would be expected. And my son Robert, and he shares just about the same exact amount, just 10 centimorgans less. The next one's my granddaughter Emma, and she shares what would be expected, about half of what my children have. And then my half sister, who should have about as much as my kids if she was my full sister, but since she's just a sister through my dad, she has about the same amount of DNA shared with me as my granddaughter does. And so this is a way to help us to see, how closely related we are. The bigger the number, the closer the relationship. And Ancestry will try to tell you how close people are based on that. We will be talking about these filters in a few minutes, but first, I just want to go pull a match from out of my list of 1,000+ matches that they had. And I pulled a Xandrance, this person called Xandrance, which obviously isn't their real name. They're a 4th to 6th cousin. I had no idea who this person is. They share 65 centimorgans, so that's a lot less than my sister, my kids, or grandkids even. But this is what you're going to have when you pull up these people at Ancestry. If they have a tree and it's linked to their DNA, and you have a tree and it's linked to your DNA, if you have a common ancestor in those trees, they're going to tell you that right away. And Xandrance has a tree, and we have a common ancestor, Alexander Wilkins and Alice Melina Barney. Here they are in her tree. These are my second great grandparents, and they're his grandparents, second great grandparents also. So that makes us third cousins. So we're actually a little closer related than what Ancestry would have predicted. And so this is why it's so cool. If you have a tree, there'll be many matches that you'll be able to just see immediately how you're related. Now, this is just the top part of the screen. The screen continues on down below there. And I forgot to click on the things on the side, but essentially it's just telling you the things I've said. Remember that being related by sharing DNA means, sharing DNA means that you are related. It doesn't tell you, the DNA itself does not tell you how you're related. This is something you have to figure out. And this is what's so nice about Ancestry, is they're trying to do as much of that for you as they can. So now below this on the screen, it will then show you surnames that Zandrins has in his tree that I have in my tree. And this can help you in trying to determine, if you didn't already know who the common ancestors were, what part of your tree you probably share if these are surnames that you're familiar with. Then at the bottom of it, they show you locations of where Zandrins' ancestors live. Now, for me, that can be helpful, because if I'm looking at thinking of somebody that's on my paternal grandfather's side, my dad's father, those would be people from the South. Well, there's no little bubbles in the US South from this person. If it was my paternal grandmother, that would then be New England area. And in fact, that's what this is. And so that's very logical to see a lot of yellow circles in the New England area, and then also over in England. If it was my maternal grandfather, they would be in the Pennsylvania area and Germany, or my maternal grandfather would be Pennsylvania, or some grandmother, Pennsylvania, or maybe England or Germany, because her ancestry was a little bit mixed. So for me, it goes to different parts of the country with the different parts of my ancestry. But Zandrins is pretty much isolated to the probably mid-Atlantic to New England area. So that's how Zandrins is related to me. Now, this is where it really gets beneficial to us. They don't just show you people you're related to, like me with Zandrins, but they will show us also shared matches. What that means is other people that are matches to me and also matches to Zandrins. This creates a situation that we call triangulation. And I've shown it down here. This is a very powerful tool, because what it's saying is that if I and Zandrins, if Zandrins and I are related, and in this case, Karen Cover and I are related, and Zandrins and Karen are related, we're all going to be related essentially the same way, in the same part of our tree. Now, it's nice, Ancestry tells me I'm much closer related to Karen. I have 283 centimorgans of shared DNA with Karen. I only have 65 with Zandrins. They don't tell me how much Karen and Zandrins share, unfortunately. But the point is that if I'm related to Zandrins through Alexander Wilkins and Alice M. Barney, then Karen should be related to us through that same essential part of my tree. That doesn't mean she goes through Alexander Wilkins and Alice Barney, but she's in the Barney and Wilkins family somewhere. And a way to show that is to look at my tree for a minute. This is my tree based on my grandmother, my dad's mother, because this is the part of the tree we're working on. Here's Alexander Wilkins and Alice Barney. If you're showing a match to a person who's related or descended from Alexander and Alice, they're also descended from all these other lines, because these are the bloodlines that flow through them down to me. And so if somebody was a McEwen or a Ballou or an Anderson or a McCrae or a Kennedy, they would show a match to me, And it would also flow through here, and Xandrins would probably show up as a shared match with them. And so it doesn't mean that it has to be Alexander and Alice. It could be Alexander Jr. That's the actual person that somebody goes through. And in this case, Karen Clover is an example of this. Karen is so closely related to me that she's actually a child of Alexander Jr. and Charlotte York Carter. So she has the blood of all of the people in this chart, whereas Xandrins only has this. But they have enough shared Wilkins-Barney DNA that they show a match on the Wilkins-Barney part of the tree. Xandrins is really not a good person to use or not Xandrins, but Karen is not a good person to use if I'm trying to match people up, because Karen's related to a whole quarter of my ancestry. Every bit of that whole quarter of my ancestry is shared with Karen. And so she's too closely related to me to be able to differentiate people very well. It's better to have people like Xandrins who tie into you a little farther back. Okay, so that's essentially how this works. Remember, the DNA says you're related. It doesn't tell you exactly. And when we say, well, they're in this Wilkins-Barney family, it doesn't mean it has to be this couple that's the people they go through. They could actually go through some of the names further back. So now let's look at their DNA tools filters, because this is where you can really be able to manage your matches very easily using these filters. The first one's unviewed. It will let you know any matches you've never opened up. And that's nice to know, because there's always new matches. And when the new matches come in, obviously they're not viewed. And so if you've looked at all the recent or close ones to you and suddenly you see one with a blue dot, you know that's a new DNA kit that's just come on. The next one is you can filter and get just all the people that have common ancestors with you. That's real neat, because you can filter out all the others and just deal with the ones that have common ancestors and get them logged in. And we'll show you what we mean by logging them in. You can see who you've messaged. You can also filter to see all the people you've written notes on. We'll be doing that. You'll know which people have trees, and there's all kinds of trees. There are people that don't have trees, and then there's people that have private trees that are linked to their DNA. Other people have public trees linked to their DNA. Other people have private trees that aren't linked, or public trees that aren't linked. So there's all kinds of tree situations at Ancestry. The nice thing is the vast majority of the people do have a tree, but not all. And then they'll tell you how much shared DNA you have, how many centimorgans, and the bigger the number, the closer the relative. And then they have a thing called groups. And that is a great tool that we're going to use tonight. So let's show you what I'm going to do to help make my matches make sense to me. The first thing I did is I went over here to groups. They provide 16 colors or 20 colors of dots, and I can do whatever I want with them. So I chose to go to my 5th generation ancestors. There's 16 of them, so I have enough dots to make a different dot for each 5th generation ancestor. And so Barney, Beck, Bortner, Carter, Craig, Kramer, Ewing, and so on are all the surname lines in my 5th generation back. So I make a dot for each of them, and I had some extras. So I made one for just general paternal ancestors and one for just general maternal ancestors. And then I can now go, now that I have these groups, I can start trying to say, how am I going to process all these people, all these ancestors of mine? So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the easy ones. the low-hanging fruit, the people that they already will tell you, here's how you're related. So I'm going to filter to the common ancestors, and I'm going to mark them with what group they're in. And we're going to show you how we do that. And we're then going to make a note that explains it so that we have all this spelled out. And it really doesn't take very long to do that. Then later, once I've done all the common ancestors, the easy stuff, I'm then going to go to the shared matches of these people that have common ancestors with me. I'm going to go to their shared matches, and using triangulation, I'll know that if they're related to me, this person with a common ancestor is related to me through the Mummert line, then those shared matches should also be related to me in the general area of my Mummert line. And so I can fill them in based on triangulation. So I need to show you how we do this. Not that bad. It's easier than you think. So I went through and I filtered my 1,000+ people for unviewed and people that had common ancestors. And I picked a couple. And I actually picked a couple that I kind of knew who they were. I know Sarah because I've worked with her for decades as a genealogist. And I know she's related to me. Brand Ockey is actually from a family here in Fresno. And I believe his name is Brandon. I have never met Brandon, but I know his family. And so it kind of helps. I know a little bit about them, but they say I have a common ancestor anyway, so we'll be able to do that. So knowing that much, we're going to start processing Sarah. And we're going to go through hers. So when I click on Sarah, it says she's a 4th to 6th cousin. We share 48 centimeters. And they say, these are our common ancestors, which I knew. Joseph E. Sands and Esther Lundy are our common ancestors. She says it's Joseph Eck, but it's really Elwood. And a little hassle over that over the decades. But anyway, they're my second great-grandparents, and they're hers. So knowing that, I need to start logging her in. And what I want to do, excuse me, is I'm going to add the group for her and add a note. And I'll be able to see that forever. Once I do it, it'll always be attached to her. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the group to her. So I click add a group, and then I click on the 2 dots to go with her, Lundy and Sands. That's all I have to do. And then when I close it, it's already saved. Then I need to add a note. So I click add a note. And in the box, I just type Joseph E. Sands and Esther Lundy. I'm going to put the names of the common ancestor, or the names of the people that through triangulation are probably the common ancestor, or at least their line. And I click save on that. I have to save it. I don't have to save the groups. Now, when I see her from now on over here in the right, it's going to always show me the 2 dots. And if I don't remember what each color represents, and I don't, all I have to do is hover my mouse over them, and it'll say that this one is Sands and this one is Lundy. And then I also will see down here, Joseph E. Sands and Esther Lundy. Once I've got that, she's tagged, she's labeled. I know who she is from now on. Now, Brandon was a little trickier. It's kind of funny because they say we have a common ancestor, William Foolsbury Carter, another one of my second great-grandfathers. His tree is locked, which means you're not really supposed to be able to see it. He only has 4 people in it, and yet they can tell me we have a common ancestor. I thought that was really interesting, and I don't know how to explain it other than they look at the 4 people that are there. They obviously found the names of some of those 4 people, probably his parents or grandparents, if he had a grandparent listed, on other trees, and were able to extend it out using other trees. So in this case, I'm going to click on View Relationship. okay, to see what's going on here. The reason there's no wife listed is William Pillsbury Carter had 4 different wives that he had children from. And so this is probably a descendant of one of the other wives. And so what I get when I look at the relationship is I see my line back to William through my great-grandmother, Charlotte, and Brandon or Brand goes back through Anelia, who's a half-sister of my great-grandmother. And she's through a different wife. She's through Roxy Meekum. And I go through Sarah York. And so they're half sisters. Now I know this tree is accurate, ironically, because I know this person here, Jenny Van Osdell Ockey. Jenny was a dear friend of my mother's, lived here in Fresno until she passed away. And she had obviously children with the last name of Ockey, and this is one of her great-grandchildren, no less, way down the line. So I know how I'm related, so I can fill in Brand's information. I put 1 dot there this time, just Carter, because the York part of it isn't applicable for him because he goes through a different wife. And then I write William Pillsbury Carter and Roxy Meekum, so I know who exactly this person goes through. And that's all we have to do for them. Now, to make the real power of this, I want to now get into the people who are shared matches. So I started working on some people that had common ancestors with me and came through my Nail line. I have an ancestor named Nail, John Nail. And so there were 2 of them that were very obvious, absolute cousins through John Nail and his wife, Elizabeth. Okay, and then there was a 3rd guy, Bob Barton, who was a little more tenuous getting back to his tree wasn't real full, or not real full, and Ancestry had a little trouble, but they did trace it back far enough to these Holtzmans that I knew how that would take me back to John Nail. So it's a little less complete or accurate, but I'm satisfied that he's related. So now I want to look at Rebecca's shared matches and Ryan's shared matches and Bob's shared matches and mark them into my Nail family too. So here's Rebecca's page. We only share 7.3 centimorgans. We're getting down to the minimum that they'll accept. Ancestry will only let you go down to 6. So anything lower than 6, you're not even going to see in your list. Here are the shared matches with her. So these are people that are related to me and related to Rebecca Reed. And since Rebecca and I are related through the Nails, these people are too. So I started recording them. Tanisha, I put down here with the Nail dot. And then I say Nail connection as a shared match with Rebecca Reed, who is John Nail and Elizabeth Tobridge. Okay, did the same thing for Marlene, and now I'll need to do it with John. I'll need to do it with Winifred. They don't even have trees. Matter of fact, from Marlene down, none of them have trees, but we're able to know how we're related because of the triangulation. Now, just working for a short period of time, like a few minutes, literally, I went from having 3 matches in my Nail group in my matches to over 21. It really does not take much time to do that. And I found that over a course of about 3 days, I was able to log in most of my matches that are 3 or 4 generations back. It is very, very simple. Now, as easy as that is, the next tool, ThruLines, is even more valuable because ThruLines really lets you do some actual genealogy checking and fixing and verifying and things like that. This is a very valuable tool. It's based both on your DNA and trees. And if you don't have a tree that's tied to your DNA at Ancestry, you can't do this. So this is why you need to have a tree there for this, because you won't even be able to participate. The DNA tells its own story, but trees, both yours and others, are dependent on good research. And if your research is faulty, your tree connections are not going to be accurate. I see some real benefits to using ThruLines. One is it can expose non-paternal events in your trees, so that, you know, if you have a whole branch in your tree that you have no ThruLines going in, then you know that there's something wrong, that those people are not really your ancestors. That'll show up just like a stoplight shows up. And conversely, it can help you to break some brick walls. And I'm going to show you that tonight a little bit. Okay, first thing Ancestry does is make a huge disclaimer. The bottom line is beware, you're using trees from Ancestry. If they're not accurate, ThruLines isn't going to be accurate. You have to understand that. The main tree that needs to be accurate is yours. Okay, it's important that the other people's trees are accurate too, but it really helps if your tree is accurate, because that's what most of this is going to be based off of. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see how ThruLines works. First thing is, where do you find it? Well, when you're on your DNA page, there's 3 sections: your DNA story, the matches that we were working, and ThruLines. But you can also get to it when you're in your linked tree, because when you're in the pedigree, every person who has a ThruLine connection to you has one of these little blue leaf things, or tree things actually. Also, when you're on a person's profile page, they'll have the little blue tree up in the corner, and down below it'll say ThruLines. Click here to see the ThruLines for this person. So there's a lot of ways to get to it. I spend most of my time getting to it off of the pedigree chart, and it will take you back with your autosomal DNA as far as autosomal DNA will work on your tree. So it's kind of nice, because when it dies out on your tree, you know you're back as far as your autosomal DNA is really going to help you. You don't have to have any questions, because there'll be no more markers in your pedigree chart for the people further back, because they don't share enough DNA with you to work. Okay, so let's see an example. This is my second great-grandfather, Joseph Elwood Sands. The question is he really my ancestor? Is he my blood ancestor? I can verify that using ThruLines, and this is how. We have 3 of his children listed here, all happen to be boys. Henry Harrison is my great-grandfather, and there are 6 of us that have taken DNA tests that are descendants of Henry Harrison Sands. That alone does not verify that Joseph would be his father, even though the paper trail says Joseph is his father. But in addition, there is a match to me who descends through his brother, William Ellis. That's my cousin, Sarah Swisher, that we talked about earlier. So she and I, through different children of Joseph, share DNA, which means these guys should be related. But then there's more. Charles Lundy Sands, their brother, has 2 more matches, a James Thomas and a DL. So there's 6, 7, 8, 9 of us that all say we descend from Joseph E. Sands that share DNA. This is a way to verify that Joseph E. Sands is, in fact, the blood ancestor of these children. So therefore, the paper trail and the blood trail match for Joseph E. Sands. Now, there are 5 other children that left descendants. They don't show on here. Why? Well, maybe they did not do any DNA, their descendants, or the DNA was so little that it didn't show up on the chart. But at least we know that through these 3, we can verify this relationship. If no other children of Joseph E. Sands had any descendants that are related to me through the DNA, I would be worried that Joseph might not really be my ancestor. Okay. So now that makes us a big plus in verifying what we know or what we think we know about our tree. Now let's take it a step further. I had a brick wall that was there for 40 years. Her name was Mary Catherine Nail. I never could figure out who her family was. And then finally, the pieces started to fall together. The big problem was the 1850 census would be a great census to help us, but she's already married, so she's not in the home. Fortunately, I knew where she lived in 1850 in Wyandotte County, Ohio, and there was only one Nail family there. It didn't have a husband, though. It was just a wife, Elizabeth, with 7 children. It turned out that the father, John, died in 1849. In fact, he's on the mortality list for the 1850 census, the list of the people that died in 1849. They made a list like that for everybody that died in 1849 that didn't show up on the 1850 census. So I was able to identify his name. I suspected that he was my Mary Catherine Nail's father, because when Mary dies in 1864, she's buried in the same cemetery as this John Nail. And in fact, she's buried in the same row, one spot away from John. There's one other grave between John Nail and his supposed daughter, Mary. Okay, so we spent years putting this family together, and we ended up with a large group of siblings. We have a big problem in the paper trail. We have to do a lot of assumptions, a lot of guesses, and there's things behind everybody that tell why they're there. We just can't do it with a real paper trail like we'd like. So is this my family? Well, the way to test it is you put this in your tree at Ancestry, and then you let the DNA play out. And what happened was this. Here's my John Nail. Here I am with my 9 other relatives that all go back to Mary Catherine, but that doesn't guarantee that John is our relative. But the daughter Sarah has 2 DNA matches that match me. The daughter Hannah has 1 match that matches me. The other son Ashford has 5 matches that match me. And the daughter Elizabeth has 10 matches that match me. We have all of these people, up to 30 matches that match me, and all are supposedly children of John Nail. This pretty much verifies that at least the children on this screen are in fact his children. And again, like for the others, there are some that didn't leave descendants and some whose descendants probably haven't tested. And we had poor Catherine Drum over here who didn't know how to do her genealogy and screwed things up. And she's actually a descendant of Mary Jane Nail because she married a Drum. She married Elias Drum. And Mary Florence Blair married one of the Drum kids. And so she really fits in. She just didn't understand how to build the tree back to Elizabeth Jane Nail. So anyway, this is a way to verify after many years of research that we were on the right track. Because how could all these other children of John Nail be related to me unless John Nail is really my ancestor? That's the point of this. Okay, I can show you one other one. This is in the same part of my tree. In early Ohio, I have a Leah Anno, who was born around 1798 in Maryland, died in 1844 in Ohio. In 1818, she married my great-grandfather, Daniel Beck, in Ross County, Ohio. And we never could figure out her. Fortunately, Anno is a very odd name. There's exactly one family in southern Ohio, and it's a family of Joseph and Esther Anno. Joseph was born in 1751 in Maryland. He actually dies in Maryland, but he had children that moved to Kentucky, and then from Kentucky most of them went to southern Ohio. And 3 of his children were boys. One was a John Anno, another one was William, and another one was Henry. And interesting enough, John and Henry married sisters, Hannah Arrowsmith and Elizabeth Arrowsmith. So we have 2 Annos marrying 2 Arrowsmiths. The William here, I left out as not being a possible father for my Leah because he stayed in northern Kentucky. He never came into Ohio. In fact, this John Anno ended up in the same county, up in Wyandotte County, Ohio, as the Nails and the Becks are. And so I kind of assumed he's probably the father of Leah. And I talked to the genealogists on that family. And the thing that they told me was that Leah's not mentioned anywhere. But they're not surprised because the records are not real complete, that it's not impossible that she could be a child of John or Henry. And so we went with the assumption for a long time that maybe she's a child of John and Hannah because of John being in Wyandotte County. So now it's time to test this out. So what we'll do is we'll put her in that family, put it in my tree, and let ThruLines play it out. And here's what happens. Here's John Anno, the supposed father. Here's my Leah with my 9 matches, and down to me. She has a brother, William. There are 3 different matches to him that match me. There's a sister, Mary, and she has a match that matches me. So I feel very confident that my Leah Anno belongs in this family. Now, it is possible that it could be through Henry. I do understand that because his DNA would be pretty much the same. But having these multiple children of John's makes it feel even stronger that it's really John that's the father. But I have a way to test this more. I can also test it through the Arrowsmith side of the family. The Arrowsmiths stem from a Samuel Arrowsmith. And he had a family that we know about. And Hannah, the wife of John Anno, Henry Anno, John Anno, is here. And there are 4 matches that go with me down through Leah up to Hannah. Her sister Mary Arrowsmith has a match, and her sister Catherine Arrowsmith has a match to me. So I have matches to the siblings of both the husband and the wife of who I think are the parents of my Leah Anno. So this is really neat because without any paperwork proof that Leah belongs in this family, she has to fit in this family because there's too many cousins that fit in with the DNA. Now, this can also be used to disprove. And so here's a case for that. Many people have said my ancestor, Jane McEwen, my fourth great grandmother, is a child of John McEwen and Isabel Stalker. I even believed it at one point. But we have since felt strongly that this is not her parentage. But many people claim it. They will, fight to the death that these are her parents. So we know that John, who married Isabel Stalker, had a bunch of kids, and many of them left descendants. And so I put their family in my tree to see what would happen with ThruLines. And when I got done, there was absolutely nothing but the people, the 89 people that match me going through Jane. And we, could be John, could be her father, but there's no collateral evidence. There's no siblings of Jane at all that show a match. And so this is a case where the DNA plays against that being the accurate relationship. It doesn't prove it isn't. It just strongly supports that this is a false relationship. So after working for about 3 days in my DNA, I had it to where when I look at any place in my match list, and this is just a picked out area down in my fourth and fifth cousins, most of them I already now know how they're related to me. It really isn't hard. And there are a lot of benefits from this, but the Ancestry has tried to make it easy for you. And I hope I've been able to explain how easy that is. So my ethnicity, I just want to say a little bit about it. I'm very unhappy with Ancestry. Their ethnic estimates are way off from what I should be. The other companies seem to do better. What's fun is they update periodically. So this is what I had a couple of years ago when I know that I'm a third German and Swiss. Most of the rest of me is English, but most of that is actually French because they were Normans that came to England. And I'm seeing right at that point really nothing for my German people other than this kind of strange Northwestern Europe, which is really nothing but England. So, really strange. Then they updated things and they went to this. Now they say I'm 46% Scottish, 24% English, 16% Irish, and 10% German. They finally gave me some German and some Norwegians, which is probably the Vikings that came down into Ireland and probably intermarried with my Irish. But anyway, you just take these things with a grain of salt when you're looking at the ethnicity things. The continental level's usually pretty accurate. And most of these will say I'm either 100% or down to maybe 96% European. But when they try to break it down below the continental level, it's really not very scientific yet. They're getting better. Maybe someday they'll really get good at it. But at this point, it's really questionable. Okay, so conclusions. Ancestry, I think, does a wonderful job. Feel free to go with them and you won't regret it. They don't provide that high-level stuff. But most of us don't want the high-level stuff. There is a browser extension called Ancestry DNA Helper. If you get that, you can compare chromosomes if that's your thing. But that's the only way. Because Ancestry itself does not provide that for you, even though it's hidden in the DNA results that they give out. Their weakness is using trees, and that can be problematic, but And for the most part, I haven't seen much problem with that. But overall, with their large database and the tools they have, they really do serve us well. So, questions? Anybody have any questions on this? I know I went fast.